Welcome back to Exceptional Children in the Music Classroom. This is part 3 of a 4-part webinar series in which our featured guest, Amber Weldon-Stevens, will be discussing the other health impaired and orthopedically impaired disabilities. If you're just tuning in with us, Amber Weldon-Stevens is currently the Department Chair and Internship Director for the Music Therapy Department with the Fulton County School System in Atlanta, Georgia. She started the program 31 years ago, and now it is one of the largest school system music therapy programs in the nation. For more information about Amber, be sure to watch part 1 of this webinar.
Hi everybody, welcome back. This is part 3 of our Working with Students with Disabilities in Music Education. I hope the other parts have been helpful. Hope you've learned a lot. There's a lot to learn. I literally feel like I'm giving you a semester's worth of information in about 4 hours, which is a lot. So I'm like shoveling information to you. Like I had said earlier, this is a book that I use when I work with students at Kennesaw State University. It's Music and Education, Music and Special Education, written by Mary Adamack and Alice Andero. It's a wonderful book. This is the 3rd edition of it. I've also been using this one, which is a great one as well, Accessing Music, Enhancing Student Learning in the General Music Classroom using UDL. This has a great of modified, I'll show you a few things in here that would be useful as well. They've modified a lot of things already for you, so this is another great book. And then there's a couple other here that I'll talk about a little later. So here we go. Let's go into part 3, Other Health Impaired. Now, under IDEA, remember there's 2 large bodies of law, 504 and IDEA, Public Law 94-142. Under IDEA, which was passed in 1975, there were 13 disability categories, and we're hitting 8 of them. And this is number 5, going on to number 5. Now, this is number 5, and they're listed differently, but this is the 5th one that we're hitting, and this is called Other Health Impaired. And I kind of but lightheartedly on this one a lot, because this one's a very interesting one that gets, now it's not, I shouldn't say light, it's just a different grouping. And so when you see this one on an IEP coming through a modification sheet, you'll be like, you're like, what exactly is that? Why haven't I seen more of that? And as I explained it, hopefully it'll make a little more sense to you. So let's talk about the definitions. Now, this is according to IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Education Act. That's what IDEA stands for. And this was the reauthorization as of 2018. Because this one, y'all, even though the laws were passed back in 75, it's been reauthorized and updated and changed and modified and added to since then. So this is the 2018 definition. Having limited strength, vitality, or alertness, including a heightened alertness to environmental stimuli, that results in limited alertness with respect to the educational environment. That is due to chronic or acute health problems such as asthma, attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, diabetes, epilepsy, a heart condition, hemophilia, lead poisoning, leukemia, nephritis, rheumatic fever, sickle cell anemia, Tourette syndrome, and adversely affects a child's educational performance. So this is, if you just think of the words, other health impaired. And before we got this really good definition, this definition's gotten much better than it was years ago. Like I've said previously, this is over 30 years now I've worked in the school setting with special needs kiddos. And my degrees, my graduate degrees are in special education. And our definition was not near this good. In fact, we used to kind of say that it was kind of, I hate to use these terms, but we said it's kind of the dumping ground, because we weren't, it's like when they didn't qualify in this, or this, but there definitely was something going on with the kiddo. So they would land them in this other health impaired because they just knew the kid needed the supports. The kid needed to put things in place so that they could succeed, but they really didn't fall under these other categories. So this one was created, other health impaired. But now that they've really fine-tuned the kind of kiddos that have been given this disability category and how it all adds up and how we can support them better. So this is other health impaired, OHI. Okay, characteristics. Here we go. Students with the predominantly inactive type of ADHD. So let me back up a little bit. There were lots of things listed on that definition. Let's go back and look. See that definition? Here it is in front of you again. But the part that is the most active in your room, the one that you're like, well, my stars, this is half my class. Attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. What's very interesting, and when I teach this at Kennesaw State for those students, is that they are sure that ADHD has got to have its own category label in IDEA. And I always say it doesn't. It's not its own category. It's under other health impaired. That's where it sits under that. And look, so does all these other things. Because as we all know, ADD and ADHD present itself differently with different kids. And different kids need different amounts of supports in place for them to succeed. So let's talk about that. So this really taps into what you're going to see in your classrooms. Because again, it's not if you see a child with ADHD, it's when. And it's going to be while you student teach, and probably every year you teach. There'll be one kid at least, if not more, who has this disability. And it presents itself very differently with kiddos. So students with predominantly inactive type of ADHD. Now remember, it used to just be ADD or ADHD, and the H equaled hyperactivity. So they could have an attention deficit issue, which really many times were a lot of the girls that would get the disability label. Those classic daydreamers, different reasons, they would be the ADDs. And then a lot of the fellas were the more hyperactivity ones. But now they've taken really away just the ADD, and it's ADHD inattentive and ADHD hyperactive. So let's talk a little bit about the inattentive. Does not pay attention to detail or often make mistakes across several activities. Has difficulty maintaining attention during activities. Does not complete schoolwork or other assignment activities. Has difficulty with organization of activities. Avoids activities that require mental effort or concentration. Loses materials necessary to complete assignments. Easily distracted, forgetful in many activities. I mean, I can think of a gazillion kiddos that are a lot like this. A lot like this. So these are the kids that need all kinds of structure. As we have said previously, structure, universal design for learning, structure, structure. Now let's go to the activity one. Now, so these are the ones that might not be such an issue or behavior issue or distracting in class because they kind of just are going to be a part of it but be distracted. And then they won't maybe turn something in, won't complete assignments, won't engage as much because they're distracted. Now let's go to the ones who are hyperactive. These are the ones that you are very aware of in your classroom. You absolutely could, you're right now in your head going, oh, that is dunk, 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 dunk. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Here we go. Fidgets or squirms in their seat. Well, let's see, what kindergarten is that not? Gets up or leaves seat frequently during class. Runs about or climbs when inappropriate and is generally restless. Difficulty in engaging in play activities quietly. Talks excessively. Blurts out answers. Has difficulty waiting their turn and interrupts others. Did I just list like a ton of little kids in your room? And how many of them maybe are taking something for this, or maybe have not been diagnosed yet, or maybe they're still trying other things to manage behaviors. And they're all in the class with you with 20 other first graders or 30 other fifth graders. All right, let's see how we can help them. Learning needs for ADHD for success in music. Now, you can see that I centered what I was going to talk about with ADHD because, yes, there are other things listed under OHI. It's not just ADHD, but this is the category that is the most prevalent in your classrooms that you're really struggling with on how to help them. So all the things that I said previously about emotional behavior disorders and SDD, because, you know, SDD, significant developmental delay, could very well be a bunch of little 4 or 5 or 6 or 7-year-olds who really have an ADHD label, but they just haven't got it yet because they're still young enough to be under SDD. But they really are presenting like this. So eventually, you would think, with the testing and supports, this may be where they classify under OHI because of ADHD. Okay. Set the student front and center of the classroom. You know they've got to be right where you can see them. Surround the student with good role models. Pick all of your good ones. If you've ever done that Smalley personality test, they talk about how there are 4 different personalities. You know, there's lots of personality tests. The golden retriever, the beaver, the otter, and the lion. Well, the golden retrievers are those get along with everybody, nurturing kind of kiddos. You know, there's flute players of the world. There's violin players. That's who you need to be around, your ADHD kiddos. You need good role models. Place the student away from high traffic areas. Don't stick them by the door. Don't stick them by the hallways. Get them to the front and center. Seat the student at an individual desk instead of a table. Do not have tables. That's hard because some of you might have tables in your rooms. If you can get yourself individualized on seats or on your carpet. It's kind of weird. It's COVID. We're still trying to work that out. When life goes a little back to normal, maybe that'll work better for you. Allow the student to move around the room at appropriate and assigned times. You need to have wiggle time. There's no way these kids can sit for 15 minutes or 40 minutes. They've got to have time to move. They are kinesthetic learners. They got to move, got to move, got to move. They got to move. Incorporate physical movement into lessons. Hello, there you go. Whenever possible. You need to have brain breaks. Brain breaks. Have them stretching. Have them touch their toes, touch the sky, touch your nose and back on down. I mean, literally everything you do, there needs to be a kinesthetic component. A kinesthetic component. Now, really good music educators, you know you do that. Secondary, that gets harder because you've got the instrument in your hand. Now they're doing something. That's a little different. There's a lot of reason why kids who might present themselves with ADHD might land towards certain instrument choices. Without me saying them, you know what I'm going, you know the answers to that. And it's because they need to be more active and engaged in their music playing. Okay. Incorporate physical movement into lessons wherever possible. Write important information down where it can easily be found. There needs to be a section on the board or right out the door. You need to know. Read it and literally have the kids stop and read it. Like I saw this one teacher and it was great. She would have the announcements and then she had, now this was pre-COVID. COVID may change things, but she literally had a high five where they had to read it and that she had to know the only way she knew they read it, as they were walking out, they'd look at it and then they'd high five the door. Well, they're not really touching it anymore. They can still high five in the air. They read it. Okay. It's a physical reminder to read what's right there. Now, remind the student where important information can be found at the door or wherever you put it. Divide big assignments into small ones. You got to give them, like if they've got to turn in this large paper on a composer of the month, then they need to know that the first week, by the end of the first week of the month, they need to have done this. And then the second week of the month, they need to have done this. Like you can't just give them all the directions at once. It's too much. So you literally need to break it down. Now remember, breaking it down will help every kid in the room. It's broken down, and you know you've broken it down for the kid who's OHI. But every kid in the room could get this. Universal design for learning. Randomly pick students to answer questions. So student cannot time attention. So student cannot take all of your time and attention. I left a word out in there. So that, remember, they need to know that I'm going to pick randomly and that I'm going to call the student's name before I ask the question. And they don't know that it could be them or they might have to wait their turn. They can't get all the turns or they can't not get any turns either. Provide a signal when questions will be answered. Letting them know that, yes, you can raise your hand, but it's time for me to teach. I say a lot of times with my ADHD kids, my turn. It's Miss Amber's turn. First it's my turn, and I'll tell you when it's your turn. It's my turn. That's easier than saying, put your hand down, stop talking. It's my turn. It's my turn. Say that a lot. Use the student's name in a question or in the subject being covered. Okay, so, Jason, this question's for you. Blah, 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 blah. Ask a simple question when the student's attention wanders. So that you can see them starting to fidget, starting to find things, whatever. And then I might say, hey, Jason, tell me again what I've got on the board here. So it's obvious, the answer's right there. Tell me where this, is this a space note? Is this a line note? So that they're answering those questions. Okay? Next, stay near the student as you are teaching. That makes you got to stay right where they are. If you start to wander away from where they are, they'll wander from what you're doing. Decrease the length of assignments or lessons. Alternate between physical and seated activities. They can't do 45 minutes sitting still. They got to get up. Give simple, concrete instructions. We said that earlier. Simple and concrete. Teach and use self-monitoring strategies that indicate attention versus inattention. Okay, so they need to know that when they need to monitor what they're doing, when it's time for them to focus, and when it's time for them to have, maybe they do get 10 seconds of brain break. Maybe they do get 10 seconds of stand up and do jumping jacks. Make sure that they know and let them be able to tell you that they need it. And if they are sitting on the far left or the far right, because the kid can handle it, or they're sitting on an exercise ball because it gives them the proprioceptive that they need, there are things that they can do that won't completely distract from the room. Make eye contact when giving directions and have the student repeat them. Okay, so they are going to say it back to you. Tell them what it is. Jason, tell me what we just said. What is it we're doing? Tell me what's next, so that they're saying it. And the ability to come to a kid and walk to a kid who's talking out or misbehaving without saying and making embarrassing them in any way. As we know, just sometimes proximity makes all the difference, or a look or a snap. I teach a choir at my church, children's choir, kindergarten through 5th grade. I got kids with all kinds of things going on in that choir, typical, not typical. And all I have to do sometimes is this. And they know it. They know that's Miss Amber's snap. And if I do it, then they're like, oh, they kind of look. Even the kiddos that are like, no, 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 no. And then I just have to walk over to them, or just this. Sometimes that's all it takes. That's all it took for my children as they were growing up. That's what it takes for my own dogs now. So you can kind of learn what you need to get their attention quickly. Okay, hyperactivity. Ask the student to run an errand or do a job for you. Develop a procedure for the student to use a stress ball, small toy, or an object. After class activities to include movement, alter classroom activities so that they're moving. Designate clear, visually signaled areas for the students to sit or stand. Sometimes these kids need that back left because they need to move. So let them kind of, stretch it out. Let them have a standing desk. Now, not that we have a lot of desk action going on because we're doing music, but if they need to stand, let them stand. Add shape, color, or texture to a classroom activity. Allow the student to do some constructive doodling. It's okay if they take their pen and they're moving and writing the whole time while you're teaching. If that's what they need to focus, let them do it. Now, that's hard when everybody else wants to do it, but if they're sitting in the far left or the far right and they have like a little bucket of stuff that they pick up on their way in the door, and everything in their bucket they can pick up and use as you're teaching. Now, if it becomes distracting and they stop being on task, then they no longer get their sensory bucket, because sometimes that's all it is a bucket of things that they can do to help them stay engaged. Even if it's just like those fidgets. So as I was teaching earlier today, this is a bag of sensory things that I would have, and this would be so a kid could pick it up on the way in the door. And if they sat in the back the whole time when they did this isn't going to make any noise, and they're just playing with this little fidget while I'm teaching or singing or whatever. Or let's say that they needed a squeeze ball. We have those stress balls, so that they needed a stress ball. So they're back there doing this the whole time. This is all they're doing, but they're listening because they need it. So don't be afraid to give them, those kiddos that need it, something. There are kids that aren't really diagnosed that might need it as well. So it's okay that everybody has a sensory ball break. Like these are, you get them $5 for $1 at the dollar store, and they're the ones with the little nibbles on there. So then this is something that you could even put a whole activity in, especially with the little kids. Let them work on their own sensory time so that they can work on it. These are great interventions to add with part of your classroom. Like you just put it as part of an interaction. Sensory time, activity break, 30 seconds, go. Yeah, okay. Moving on. Sorry, I'm making sure I got everything. Designate clear, visually signal areas for the student to sit or stand. Add shape or color. Allow doodling. Schedule times for physical activity. Take breaks throughout a long or tedious task. Okay, moving on. Impulsivity. Make a written plan with 1 or 2 goals and place it near the student. Change rewards if they are not effective in changing behavior. Sometimes kids have to be rewarded. I wish they would internally just do the right thing, but it doesn't always happen. Reward more than you punish using positive reinforcement. I never take anything from kids if they've earned it. If they're working on a star chart or working on a smile chart or working on points, I would never say after they'd earned something and then they did something lousy, I wouldn't say, oh, you lost your point. I would just, they didn't earn the next one. Because it's hard to take it away. They don't handle that. They handle not earning it and being given an opportunity to earn it again in the session. Give consequences immediately following misbehavior, and be specific in explanations. And we can give consequences that are still surrounded in support and love. They don't need to be punitive. Give advance warning of when transition is going to take place. 2 more minutes, we got 2 more minutes. 1 more minute, we got 1 more minute. Praise good behavior and be specific with your praise. Thank you for closing that book and standing right up. Provide as much positive attention and recognition as possible. Almost overdoing it sometimes because that's what they need. Pause about 5 seconds before answering questions so that the room has time to stop and listen, so that everybody's listening when you answer an important question. Have the student repeat the questions before answering. Choose a student to be a question keeper in case that's a great thing. Now, not necessarily the student that has ADHD, but somebody in the room keeps up with the questions so that you can make sure you get them all answered. And use lighting to signal an activity change. How many times have I gone, especially at my church, when I needed to switch the kids up and what they needed, I'd go click the lights. I'm like, okay, here we go. We're all done. You got 1 more minute, and I'd flip the lighting. Okay? another way to kind of help these kids focus and do well done. So definitions for orthopedic impairments. I've had a lot of kids with orthopedic impairments over the years. So this could get really medical. I'm going to try to not go so medical with this and try to really hit what you need to know about orthopedic impairments. So a collection of physical disabilities caused by either a congenital abnormality, impairments caused by disease, or impairments from other causes, broken down into three main categories. So there's neuromotor impairments, and that's something that happens. It's a brain reason that the body, so the communication from the brain to the spine and out to the body isn't working because of whatever the issue. Degenerative diseases, the muscular dystrophies, musculoskeletal disorders, osteogenesis imperfecta. And there are lots of other things listed in all that. So neuromotor impairments could be cerebral palsy. I could go on with all the medical pieces of what falls under that, but just know that there are three major ones. If it's a neuro, because of a brain disorder, degenerative, which is just going to get worse because of muscle issues and degenerative forms. I think there's 9 different areas of muscular dystrophy, or musculoskeletal disorders that there are issues within. Even rheumatoid arthritis could fall into this. So characteristics. There are common characteristics that can be present in some, but not all cases, including concerns with gross and fine motor skills. These kids are coming to you maybe in wheelchairs, maybe with walkers. So dancing is not always going to be an option for them. Associated speech impairments or multiple disabilities. Sometimes cerebral palsy can affect the ability to speak. Their brain is fine. They just can't communicate because of spasticity or blocks that's going on here from the brain to the communication systems. Social interaction with peers may be limited because they look different. They communicate differently. Pain or discomfort related to their diagnosis, especially if it's degenerative or musculoskeletal. Some diseases may be chronic and or terminal. I have lost kids with terminal diseases. And that's always hard. May experience feelings of helplessness or depression because this is what they have, and they watch others run and play, and they may not be able to do that, and could lead to poor self-concept or self-advocacy skills. I worked for 10 years with kids with orthopedic impairments in this county, and I have such memories of taking those kids out. I took these kids caroling once, and we had like 6 or 7 lift buses because everybody was in a wheelchair. So I needed every lift bus that the county had that they would let me take out. At the time, we could get up to 5 chairs on a bus. So I must have had, 5 buses, and off we went caroling at Walmart, or we were at farmer's market, and oh my goodness, they sang with every ounce of their hearts, and there wasn't a dry eye. There's nothing, these kids, they are just kids, and they're kids that can be so incredibly musically talented. But for whatever reason, their bodies aren't cooperating with them. So let's talk a little bit about what they need. Learning needs. Most of the students with orthopedic impairments need accommodations in the classroom for assessing academic instructions to increase their educational development, special seating arrangements to develop useful posture and movement, instruction focused on development of gross and fine motor. So many of these kids, remember, it's orthopedic, it's not cognitive. So their little brains are just clucking right along. It's just their body doesn't do what their brain wants them to do. So awareness of medical condition and its effect on the student, feeling tired or sleepy after medication. Now, since so much of these are medical and physical needs of our orthopedically impaired kiddos, it is important that you know, especially what the time of day that you have the child, if you have them right after a medication dose or right after a real long day, like right after they've eaten, or at the very end of the day, you just have to be aware of how they're reacting and the things you're asking them to do. It's just things to remember. And a lot of this is going to be in those adaptations and modification forms that you get as part of their IEP, and that you have to sign off of so that you know in the 504 plans. So provide suitable assistive technology to address their needs, which could include devices to access information. So again, remember, orthopedic impairments is anything that impairs their ability to walk, to move, or to speak. So some of them could very well have devices that they are amazing at. Stephen Hawkins, if you think about how amazing his brain was, but how his body was just shutting down, he had ALS. So ALS could also be a form that would, kind of classify under some orthopedic impairments, because at the end it is an orthopedic motor muscle issue so that you could stop ability to move anything, or people that have some traumatic injuries that might have a vertebrae break in the back or some spinal cord injuries, and it could impede their ability to actually move, but functionally their brain is fine. It's just their bodies have kind of quit on them. So they might need a device, a very advanced advice that could be a big iPad or even something larger. I've had kids that even use their eye gaze to communicate. If you've seen that show on television where that young man uses this eye gaze and this pointer that he has attached, that he does it with this little flashlight so that they can communicate with his mother, because he cannot do this. The child had cerebral palsy. So cerebral palsy is a lesion to the brain. And at a time that either in utero or during the birth process or after birth, that they had some kind of accident or issue that stopped oxygen to the brain, which built a lesion on the brain. And so according to where and how long that happened is how impaired a child is, and whether the impairment is one arm or two arms or one hand or 2 feet. So again, cognitively they could be fine in what they can do. They just may not be able to talk to you or move the way they need to move, or be able to respond, but yet they're understanding what you're asking them completely. So these devices, and now more than ever, the technology is so advanced that there are speech recognition software and screen reading software and augmentative and alternative devices, like I had shown earlier, like this one, which now this is truly just a low-tech device. This is a low-tech device, and this needs to be, like, this is for the music teacher who needs to go back and forth with the child. But for them, these are like some pretty involved devices that they have even had iPads, and much bigger than iPads, and these large screens that sit on their wheelchairs, and they come into their rooms and they have the complete talkers so that they themselves can maneuver them, because they have all the cognitive ability to do it. Their body just doesn't allow them to do it. And academic software packages. So devices for positioning and mobility. You know, some kids may need a cane or a walker or crutches or wheelchairs or specialized equipment, exercise equipment, specialized chairs and desks and things so they can have proper posture and helping them sit up, because they may have vestibular issues as well. So think all things motor and physical and bone related, orthopedic impairments. Now, not so much processing as it is orthopedic. All right, now let's see how we can help that in music education. So successes in music. Well, remember, singing will help students stable breathing and increase lung control. Now, like kids with muscular dystrophy, they may have issues with deep breathing, and there's a whole group of them that have issues with their ability to take those deep breaths and the linings around the lungs, and what they need to be able to support a good singing. But that doesn't mean that you can't still work on singing, but taking good deep breaths and teaching that along with their ability to produce the sound. And using adaptive instruments, again, like West Music, they are great. They have a whole department where they are adapting music instruments and rhythm instruments and all kinds of instruments, using Velcro straps for hand drums and other percussive instruments so that the kids can actually engage in them. They have a lot of adapted mallets also that you can purchase at West, which is a great thing to just have in your classrooms. Listening to music and responding to music, allowing the kids who can physically, if they're unable to really do some of the movements, it would allow them to listen and participate, to grasp an instrument if they need to, that you can use Velcro as well to put a mallet in their hands, and then helping them participate and play the drum. The ideas are that you don't want to stop teaching the way you are teaching, but how can you engage those kids in your classroom so that they too can have some level of response to what you're asking the other kids to do as well. You will thoroughly enjoy your students with orthopedic impairments. They'll want to be there, they'll warm your heart, and they'll make you think outside of the box. Like, how could you do things a little differently? Or maybe you could present something a little differently. Or maybe the kid needs to just have this kind of support or use this kind of a mallet. So I urge you to just kind of think not in the same lane as everyone else, but step outside of that, of your comfort zone even, and engage these kids. And at the secondary level, we've had kids through the years that have wanted to be a marching band, but they didn't have legs that worked. Their legs, for whatever reasons, weren't working. And so I've seen parents be a part of their kids' involvement with marching band, and that is so incredibly sweet. I've seen parents involved with kids doing all kinds of secondary music and experiences. So don't let your first reaction be no. Let your first reaction be yes. And when in doubt, you call for some help. and we'll see how we can help you. So I hope you've enjoyed this third part. We have covered orthopedic impairments, other health impairments, and now we have one more to go, part 4. I hope you'll stick around or come back later. Thanks.
Thank you so much for watching part 3 of this 4-part webinar series on teaching exceptional children in the music classroom. Before we close, I want to thank Amber for her wealth of knowledge and expertise on this topic and her willingness to share it with others. Our hopes are that you learn something, take some time to reflect on it, and begin to use the information and instructional strategies discussed in this webinar to inform your own teaching practice and support your efforts to reach and teach all students, including those with special needs, in your own music classrooms. Here is my contact information as well as Amber's contact information if you would like to discuss this further or have any additional questions. We'd love to chat. I would ask that if you have a moment to please fill out our brief feedback survey using a QR code reader or type the URL in your browser. One of our goals at the Georgia Department of Education Fine Arts team is to provide relevant and informative, content-specific professional development for fine arts teachers across the state. So any feedback you could provide us would be greatly appreciated and highly beneficial so that we can provide you with the best professional development opportunities as possible. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great day.